New Year to everyone. Welcome to the inaugural event of the Utah Breakfast Club, January 15, 2015. I'm Drew Clark, the founder of Utah Breakfast Club and of council at Kirk McConkie in Salt Lake City. And really very pleased to welcome each of you here to this inaugural event. I wanted to say just a word about the Utah Breakfast Club, its purpose, before introducing our topic today and our panel. As a reminder, we will be videotaping this event and posting a version of it on our webpage, utahbreakfast.com, so that you and others can enjoy it and hopefully preserve it as a resource for those who care about issues of Utah's economy, politics, culture, and its future. Just a bit about myself. I am a writer and attorney by background, and I did a similar breakfast club in Washington, D.C. called the Broadband Breakfast Club. We started it about 7 years ago, and we were talking about things like fiber infrastructure, net neutrality, gigabit internet, long before the president talked about it in the State of the Union address, as he did yesterday. So, pleased to be part of something that you can see its impacts many years later. Since I moved to Utah 18 months ago, I've been really impressed with so many aspects of the economy and opportunity in the state. And this idea just was germinating slowly and came to fruition as I started talking with people and other organizations, and really pleased to announce our partnership with our founding sponsors, Utah Foundation. Thank you for being here with us today, those of you from the Utah Foundation, as well as Beehive Startups. In fact, the next event of the Utah Breakfast Club will be a little bit different because we're going to be doing it in conjunction with Start SLC, Utah's largest startup festival, which will take place on January 29th, 30th, and 31st, and we'll have a panel on Silicon Slopes, How Real is the Marketing Hype, that will take place on Saturday, January 31st. But we'll be back to our regular breakfast format next month, February 12th. So mark your calendars for the second Thursday of each month, right here, where we'll consider other topics from solving problems like the inversion, dealing with educational issues, taking advantage of natural opportunities, the outdoor recreation industry, and so forth. So with that, let me go ahead and turn to our panel. We're really excited to have Virginia Pierce as one of our panelists, and I'll be starting with her once I just give brief introductions of the rest of our panel. We have five wonderfully knowledgeable individuals here to speak with us about the entertainment and digital media industries here in Utah, particularly on the Wasatch Front. Topic today, of course, Hollywood on the Wasatch Front. And we'll be exploring a little bit about what the opportunities and challenges are for the entertainment industry and digital media industries here in the state. As I just mentioned, our first panelist will be Virginia Pierce. Excuse me one moment while I call my bios up right here. Virginia Pierce is the director of the Utah Film Commission. We're really grateful that she can join us. She's over 15 years of experience in marketing and external relations in the industry, and was formerly the director of marketing and community programs at SpyHop. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that in conjunction with other things as we speak with Virginia. She's off to a great start as the head of the Film Commission. We'll hear a little bit more about some of the issues that the Film Commission is dealing with and confronting. Next on our panel is Marshall Wright. Marshall is the Director of Business Development for the state of Utah, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and he is responsible for new and sustaining Utah businesses in the sectors of aerospace, defense markets, and is also focused on transformative technologies. He has some interesting things to say about some very transformative technologies, namely drones and unmanned airborne vehicles. To his left is John Dean. John is the CEO of Zach Fact. Have I got that right? All right, good. And Zach Fact, he'll tell us more about Zach Fact, but perhaps most notable among his bios is that he was the vice president at Electronic Arts, general manager of their Salt Lake, as well as Raleigh-Durham development and production studios, and was responsible for many hit EA games, including EA Sports. So I want to hear a little bit about the video industry, which is kind of one of the secrets of Salt Lake, is a really deep bench of experience in computer graphics, rendering, and video games, both in the sort of small startup space as well as established veterans. And so we want to hear a little bit about the connections, John, between those and the more traditional entertainment industries. Fourth panelist is Craig Caldwell. Craig is the Utah Science, Technology, and Research Professor of Film and Media Arts in the Film and Media Arts Department at the School of Computer Science at the University of Utah. So he's got a lot of experience in Walt Disney feature animation as well as electronic arts, and really can speak about some of the great programs at the University of Utah as well as in the industry. So we'll look forward to Craig's perspectives. Last but not least is Clark Stacy. Clark's an entrepreneur and the co-founder of WildWorks, which I think is a relatively new company, but he's by no means a newbie. He's a veteran of many free-to-play games for kids, Smart Bomb Interactive, and in 2010 the company launched Animal Jam, which has become the largest online social network for kids. So we're going to want to talk a little bit about some of the areas of digital entertainment that have worked for family media and other types of kids entertainment. So thank you again to be here. Let me go ahead and take my seat next to the panelists, and we'll start our conversation now. So Virginia, I promised to start with you. Tell us a little bit about some of the assets and challenges facing the Utah Film Commission.
Well, I think our goal is really to be a liaison for the film industry and to help them build the economy here, both in crew and cast and all the support services that we have here in Utah for the film industry. And obviously some of the challenges are just getting those films in the door. I think there's a lot of competing states. The incentive does play a role, and in the scheme of things, our incentive package is relatively small, so we have to use our other assets to really contribute to getting them here.
To talk a little bit about that incentive package, I think it was with some other in the industry, we're talking about Georgia and how they had a much richer package. Tell us a little bit about what other states offer, what Utah offers, and maybe what you do to compensate for the differences.
Well, there are, I think 75% of states offer some sort of incentive package. It does play a huge role in where films go. There are a lot of directors that say, I want to shoot in California, this story is based in San Francisco, and for economic reasons it just isn't feasible. So many different films are often based in a different state because of incentives and then just shot for that specific location. Utah's $6.8 million refundable program gets renewed every year. But when you compare to even our neighbor New Mexico, they have $50 million to give away every year. So really, in the scale of where we are among states, California has $330 million, so we're definitely in the smaller market. However, incentives are not the only thing. So you talk about the industry here, and a lot of filmmakers do say, okay, well I could go to Alabama because the incentive package is larger there, but there is no infrastructure, there's no industry. I would have to bring my entire crew and equipment with me. Well, that is not the case in Utah. For a city our size, we have, obviously, a lot of people can speak to this, we have a very well-developed film industry. We have 2 or 3 crews deep of really top-tier A-list crew. We had post houses, we had production houses, so the infrastructure for that is already set up here, so that's definitely what we're selling.
And in spite of that small size of incentive package, the $6.8 million, Utah seems to have done well to help its own. Do you have kind of any stats on how many films are made in the state versus other states?
Well, I know this particular year, or the year, fiscal year 14 that we finished in the summer, we had about almost $60 million of economic impact in the state, and I've created about 1,600 jobs. That's just in 1 year, and over the course of history, there's been 900 films shot in Utah, so it's obviously a significant industry here. Something that we'd love to see grow. We had series here in the 90s and 2000s that really were impactful in a big way, keeping people employed on a regular basis, and we'd love to see that come back. So that's definitely where we're headed.
So if I'm hearing you right, some of the key assets are the depth of talent that is available here, and presumably the natural resources. Are you going to speak to that?
Obviously, yes. I mean, our diverse geography is obviously what sets us apart from a lot of different places, and the fact that you can shoot for cities, and you can shoot deserts, and you can shoot mountains all within a half-day's drive. And I heard that. I went to California and talked to production studios, and the appeal of being able to shoot small-town USA and urban city and mountains and deserts and still be based in Salt Lake City has huge appeal, because you're not stuck in a small town. Your crew can get in and out. Your top-tier actors can get in and out. So,
just incidentally, that's something I hear a lot with regard to the outdoor recreation industry, that it's the proximity of the natural resources that is a great benefit and asset for the industry. Marshall, GoEd is obviously part of this conversation as well. Could you just speak a little bit, maybe to point some of our audience to the relationship between GoEd and the Film Commission and the mandate that you have to help promote industries, including the entertainment industry here in the state?
Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? First of all, we're basically co-located. We're part of the same organization under GoEd, under the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So we do mutually support one another. What we find very, very clearly within the whole idea of what film is able to do for us as advertising in the state is absolutely amazing. When that trailer comes up at the end of the film and it says, shot in Utah, that's amazing. That's worth more money than we could ever put out for our actual advertising, if you will. With that being said, part of what I've been trying to do over the last few years is taking transformative technologies and transformative technologies and bringing them into commercial applications. One of which was, as we said earlier, I'm out of the aerospace and defense industry. One of the things that came to me was unmanned systems. Somewhere early in my business activities here with GoEd, I found out that it was mutually supportive of all of the media operations, digital media that was going on, and also the film industry. And clearly in the last year or so, what we've found is that a lot of the operators who are supporting film are using some of the technologies that came out of the aerospace industry. Mainly, I hate to use the word drone, but that's the word we'll have to use. I call them unmanned aerial systems. Every time I start talking about unmanned aerial systems, I point out the difference between a drone and an unmanned aerial system. Drone, coming from the insect world, has only one simple purpose, and I think we all can smile and know what that purpose is, and it dies after performing that particular act. What we talk about with unmanned aerial systems is that there's something that can be used over and over again. Last year, it was quite interesting. A number of folks in the film industry came to me because they knew that I had been involved in unmanned aerial systems and promoting that. They said that they were running into issues and wanted to understand how the digital media capabilities with unmanned systems could be used more commercially, particularly understanding that a lot of shots could use an unmanned aerial system or a drone to really get in on the action. The one thing that stands between a lot of commercial operations of unmanned aerial systems or drones is the FAA. And so they asked me, what could we do? I have been following some of the action that the FAA has been involved in over the last few years, participating in a number of programs to bring unmanned aerial systems tests and evaluations and growth of the commercial area around that. And so with that, we started taking a good look at some of the opportunities that are out there at this particular point. As I said, the FAA is the one who's been controlling the operations, commercial operations for unmanned systems. Back in 2012, the FAA had what was called the FAA's Reform and Modernization Act, which gave them certain mandates to do something about allowing commercial operations of unmanned systems in the national airspace. The biggest problem that the FAA has had is that a lot of their ideas and the way they wanted to start off, they absolutely did not understand the proliferation of the kinds of technologies that we have, the capabilities that they had, and how fast it was changing. Their regulatory process is too slow to allow easy commercialization of that into the national airspace. So over the last couple of years or so, the whole industry has been saying, how can we move? What can we do? So under that act that I talked about, there were certain things that could be done, which, as it turns out, there was a process where you can go to the FAA and explain to them how you were operating in a commercial environment in a safe and responsible manner, and you will be able to get a what is called a certificate of authorization to fly. And that has been very onerous, and it's held back a lot of the activities that we have. Now, we're trying very, very hard to work with the film operators here in the state to support that activity, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. But I think that that's the big.
Yeah, no, it's great, Marshall. Two questions. One, is film the primary industry that wants to make use of unmanned systems, or are there others that you're finding a great desire to use them?
That's great. As it turns out, film is only one. Within that same act, the Congress told the FAA to look at a number of commercial operations, agriculture, infrastructure support, and monitoring is another one. Just about anything that we haven't thought about at this point would be one of the things that could be used.
Now, what process, if any, does the state have to intervene and sort of help out? I mean, what does a filmmaker do if they want to, in a national park or near a site of that sort, use an unmanned vehicle?
Well, here's what we're doing. Under that act, there's a process called exemptions. It's called Section 333 exemption. The Motion Picture Association, along with a number of film operators in California, went and received one of those exemptions, which now makes it easier for those operators to use unmanned systems under certain prescribed regulations and requirements that they spell out. We here in the state are now forming to do exactly the same thing. With the film industry coming to us with the Film Commission and with GOED, we're moving forward in that area. We're getting great support from our academic partners at UVU and Salt Lake Community College and at U to support that activity. So we're hopeful that within the next few months or so, we will be able to get an exemption for our operators also.
That's great. That's great. And you can just see the uses. I can just imagine in my mind that the uses for an unmanned vehicle on the shots that maybe are very dramatic in Utah.
Oh, absolutely.
Great. Well, let's turn to John. John, first off, what is ZACFAC? And second, could you just describe a little bit about that document that you sent me that I posted on Utah Breakfast that talks a little bit about Utah's digital media architecture?
So thank you for inviting us. Hello, everybody. My first note back that to you, Drew, Supper Club might work best for digital. I think you expect a much bigger turnout.
Take that advice.
Exact fact, exact frequently asked questions. That's where it came from. It's not the best name we could have come up with, but we could trademark it. No one else had it, so you use it. So we make apps. We also do consultancy for other companies. So yes, I've been in video games all the time. One of the things that I was fortunate to have worked on in the last few years was to be invited with many other people in this room to work on the Utah Cluster Accelerator Partnership for digital media. And it took about 18 months. We published a report in 2011, and it's shocking that almost nothing from that report has actually been acted upon. But it was done for a number of different groups in the state because digital media is a priority for the state. But I think one of the challenges that we have, and I'll come to the report at the moment, is actually what is digital media? Right? It's a bit like saying who uses electricity. I mean, there's somebody who uses QuickBooks, so they digital media, and so actually, I try and think now digital media might be the wrong terminology because so much of industry these days uses computers in some way, or computer technology in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's more helpful to us to think about focusing in order to figure out what can be enacted. Anyway, we can get onto that later, but here's some of the conclusions I'll read you from the report that we came up with. So Utah has a rich legacy of pioneering digital media innovation and technology advancements. There's a lot of background, particularly coming from the University of Utah. Delighted to say that work still continues under Roger and his crew, and all the work they're doing now. Utah's digital media cluster employs over 1,500 workers. I'm sure it's more than that, but this was the data that we could find that was publicly available on the basis that we were still trying to figure out who's in digital media. Utah businesses in this cluster have direct annual revenues exceeding $415 million, and that was 2011 dollars, people. In general, workers in digital media are paid above average wage rates for the state. 41% of all digital media jobs are in the video gaming sector. Again, I suspect it's slightly smaller than that. It's just the video game people turned up. 20% of jobs are in the simulation sector, and Utah can best accelerate the expansion of the industry by fostering creative technology and talent. And technology innovation that will drive the future of the industry. Our strategic goal is to become the creative and technological epicenter for educating, training, and stimulating both creative thinking and innovative technologies that will shape the future of the digital media industry. Utah will be a must-connect-to state for any business that hopes to succeed in the global digital media industry. And at that time, and it says here, I'm quoting, we feel confident in setting a goal for 2016, that's next year, people, that includes 3,000 total jobs and a direct revenue increase to $800 million. So again, if we define digital media, that might help us better understand whether that's achievable. And we were going to achieve this, particularly with the idea of what we called the intersection of creativity and technology. And really what that meant was, we spent a lot of time in the last few years industry working with our local higher education establishments. That was one of the great things that came out of UCAP, was there was a much better partnership between industry and our partners in higher education. And the thinking was to create a commercial standard. So rather than the universities really teach folks in digital media how to use the tools that would allow them to get jobs. One of the problems is, of course, that those jobs, if all you can do is use a tool, someone else can be taught to use that tool, and that can be outsourced elsewhere in the world at a much lower cost. And so consequently, you're teaching people to be trained for jobs that ultimately they're priced out of, even here in the state of Utah. So the thinking was, well, Silicon Valley is the most expensive place in the world to actually have a business. And yet somehow there's a lot of money there, and there's a lot of jobs there. What do they have? They have a lot of innovation, and it attracts the best thinkers. So part of our effort, part of the UCAP recommendation, was to see if we could help our higher education establishments, and in fact our entire school network in the state, actually create creative thinkers, problem solvers, and then teach them how to apply those into technology, because that creates the kind of innovation that we'll have. I mean, you actually see in Silicon Valley. That's a large goal, but it's actually very achievable if we put all the different factors to play here. Now, getting that to happen is the challenge. We have to get all the right parties together to make that happen.
So, John, you said a couple of things that are very interesting and provocative. The issue of digital media and how mature an industry it is. I mean, when we talk about the tech sector, Utah in 2015 was the 6th highest state in venture capital raise. Not on a per capita basis. This is on a gross basis, okay? Considering the size of Utah, that's an incredible achievement. And so the tech, and most of this, of course, is driven by a lot of the tech, info tech companies. So how would you characterize the digital media vis-a-vis tech? I mean, Virginia has spoken about how deep the talent is on the film production side. How would you kind of characterize digital media in that mix?
First of all, I would say I want some of Marshall's drones so we can maybe do it. That's a huge opportunity, Marshall. I think the characterization for me comes down to I guess I think of it less in terms of technology per se, because there's another very broad term. I think of it in terms of where could it lead to, what does it mean for the state in terms of a driver of economic growth and ultimately revenue. Where do our students go? So Roger's putting out great students, UVU's putting out great students qualified in digital media. We define it. What do they do next? They've got great ideas. We're missing kind of something in between. So all the venture capital could be put to good use, actually, not just like being second stage capital, which is what a lot of our venture capital is. It's to help companies grow that already have something. I'm talking about seed to help people coming out of the university with great ideas, rather than having to go and work in Silicon Valley or somewhere else.
Well, this is where the incubator notion is coming in. There's a lot of activity in this space on tech. But again, let's translate it to digital media. I know the two very broad terms. Are we seeing enough talent getting fostered in that area? And if not, what can we do?
Well, I think we're starting to see that coming through our university pipelines now. I think that there's more coming, and my fear is that one of the things that digital media does, it actually doesn't create jobs in the way that manufacturing used to. So in fact, one of the things that digital media does, it's very disruptive if it's good. It actually means that you can do the same things for less and on a much bigger scale. And that's all driven by cloud technologies. So actually, I think cloud technologies is the connective tissue that I would see defining digital media for the future.
Great.
And it's those skills in those areas.
Well, and that's a great point, because the cloud is where all of the tech services are going, and I think film production too. Virginia, do you have any thoughts on some of the things that John has said here?
Well, just that, I mean, it's getting increasingly hard to talk about film without talking about digital media. And obviously the three organizations that I have been associated with, Sundance, SpyHop, and now the Film Commission, all, when I look at where we started at Sundance in '97, when I started working for them, the New Frontier wasn't a thing, and transmedia wasn't really a thing, and we were still showing 85% of the films on 35 millimeter. Now, there is, I just spoke with them, there's 2 films being shown 35 millimeter this year, the rest are digital. And transmedia, New Frontier is 30% of the programming now is really about this new media. So I'm very interested in the Film Commission really helping transcend that gap between film and digital media, because I think really it's solid one.
So if I can ask this, if I can maybe both of you for this too. So film has traditionally been a great kind of flag bearer for the state, right? Because we see the movies featured and so on, and that's been a lot of the film commission is to bring the film production in, right? But increasingly, it's down to cost. So what do you think digital media represents from the point of film? But we can then claim and say, well, this is why you come to Utah for the digital media. What is it we're doing in digital media and film that would be attractive to a company better than, say, taking that same digital media, post-processing, or whatever to India?
Well, I do think where we're going with so many digital media and tech companies here in Utah, and the whole idea of the Silicon Slopes, which I'm going to address in February, plays a part. I mean, I hear from filmmakers the relevancy of what companies in Salt Lake City are doing, Smart Bomb and Chair and all these, startup, now not really even a startup company, is vital. So I think that we can speak to, and the depth of knowledge. And I worry too that kids that are coming out of SpyHop and UVU and BYU, SLID, are all just heading out of town because there isn't that. There's a skip. You know, we're looking for upper management in these high-tech digital media companies, but there isn't so many.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that I heard Provo Mayor John Curtis say at one of Beehive Startups, another of our sponsors events last year, the tail end of last year. He said that when he went to BYU, it was kind of an assumption everyone was going to leave town after graduating to get a job. Now, with Provo being one of the gigabit cities with the kinds of connectivity that's available through Utopia and elsewhere, I mean, you don't need to do that. I mean, the industry is here right now. So I think maybe it's kind of tech perhaps a little earlier, and now we've seen this for digital media as well. Did you want to say something quickly, Marshall?
Yeah, very quickly. What I think we're finding right now is that if we use the digital technologies, digital media, as part of a platform for innovation upon innovation, I think that's what we're really talking about. So, like you said, you want to use our drones, okay, my drones.
Your drones.
Yeah, my drones, Marshall's drones. That actually, it's a platform for using digital technologies to do a number of things. Just quickly, CNN and Georgia Tech tied together and just got an exemption to use drone technologies, if you will, digital technologies, and the cloud to support activities that CNN is doing. So that is what we really want to do, I think, digital media, use it as a tool, and that's what it is.
Well, definitely a lot of synergies here. Let's continue the conversation down our panel and invite Craig Caldwell into the mix. Talk a little bit about education. Perhaps you could speak more about the educational underpinnings of the video game industry and where you see education helping digital media and technology.
I think where I can add is when I first came to the state 5 years ago, Brett Adams talked about people leaving the state, and we looked for what we could do at the U. And Roger had already, and Bob had already started the games program, and we started it up from there. And we got rankings very early. And we've been pushing that on a national level. We have new rankings coming out in March, and I can't tell you what they are because they're so high. They come out in March. They're in March. As well as we go to the Game Developers Conference, and we go with 110 students, and they now go, we make them wear Utah. For sure. We print them up, and they go everywhere. So between the rankings, they see everything that we're doing. Now, we initially thought the entertainment industry, we have these wonderful gentlemen here, have wonderful companies, but they can't absorb all our graduates. And because we're up there where health sciences is, they started to see what we were doing, and they asked us to come over. And just this year, they put a permanent space up there for the Game and Apps Lab. Roger over here heads it up in terms of new incubator apps that are coming out of it that we had not even thought about. We're like, medicine? And they actually call it a field, digital medicine. The hospitals are really racing after it. We know that on our telephones, they're health apps. You will not leave the doctor's office in 10 years with a minor procedure or major procedure without you being followed with an app. You are to follow up on what you're supposed to do, and it's going to tell you, and your doctor's going to know whether you're doing it or not, because if you don't, 20% of the re-entries into hospitals because you haven't followed up, and they want to address that. So there are some big changes coming about. And our students, if you've got 110 students running around looking at Google Glasses and the cardboard glasses and coming up with apps for that every time you turn around, or a game where it's about your eye, it's tracking your eye movements that take place. And I can tell you, doing a game with eye movements, you have about 90 seconds before your eyes wear out. But eye doctors love it because they want you to practice exercise after an operation, and this, really gets you to do it. So
that's very exciting. So how has this worked out? I mean, how did spending 110 people to the gamers conferences go? What was the result of doing that?
That's where the rankings come in. People are becoming much more aware of Utah and what's coming about, because it's happening at UVU, it's happening at Pretty Young, it's happening at all the different areas. So, like I said, so the students don't leave the state. There's that collectiveness that's happening.
Could you also address the question John spoke about, which is the depth of talent in digital media vis-a-vis tech and entertainment. How can we ensure that there's you know, a vibrant ecosystem in the spaces that you're dealing with too?
What we do is we make sure the students have the fundamental skills. It's tough. They get really seduced by technology, and they think that technology is what you need to do. And making sure they have that, and then putting them in environments where they work together, whether it's computer scientists, whether it's artists, or it's game designers. We've also just developed, we're in the process of developing an MBA with the business department because it's the monetization. You can have a great game, but if the public doesn't know about it, they don't have access to it, they don't respond to it, boom, it dies. I guess that's like film, isn't it? You have great films nobody sees. I bet you more fingers and toes. Great films nobody sees.
Attachment to a drug.
Well, Clark, why don't you talk about some of the things that Smart Mom and WildWorks have done or are doing, and maybe lend your reactions to some of the things you've heard thus far.
Sure. Excuse me. I think I can maybe speak to the industry point of view of having worked with what's happened with Craig's programs and with education in the state in the last few years. 10 years ago, hiring out of the local universities, we were hiring computer science graduates who had never worked in games, but were all getting 4-year computer science degrees because they wanted to work in games. But they weren't working on anything in school that was not more than tangentially related to games. 3D artists, the same thing, coming out of fine arts programs. These kids coming out of these programs now have actually been working in game development programs, working with the same tools that we work with, and actually gelling as a team. And they come out. This is kind of my hobby horse on this topic. But if they were coming out of Stanford or UC Santa Cruz, they would be starting companies. They already have all of the ingredients to start a company. They have everything except access to capital. But we do have a mature venture market here. Marshall could probably speak to the numbers much better than I could. I don't think a lot of it is in IT proportionally, and certainly not much of that is in digital media. The venture market that needs to exist here for these companies to come out of these programs and stay here and build that infrastructure is not that significant. The barriers to entry are fairly low for something like the Apple App Store. They're not looking for millions of dollars in seed money, they're looking for a couple $100,000. But that I think is the difference if you talk to startups in the games industry, at least in Silicon Valley, and you ask them why are they there with this incredibly high cost of living, very expensive place to run a business. It's because that's where all the money is. That's where all the VCs are.
In fact, the VCs encourage you to be there.
Yeah, a lot of them would require it. I think that there's more interest now. The interest is picking up here, but I really think that is the last piece of the puzzle. It's true that we compete with other states who have incentive programs for games. We especially compete with Canada, which has very robust incentive programs for games. But by the same token, I don't know that they're really nurturing what they have that's homegrown in Montreal, which has spent probably the most money trying to attract companies there. 90% of their workers in games are from out of the country. And those companies, as soon as the incentives are gone, a lot of those jobs start to go elsewhere. I think much more interesting programs are things, there's a Montreal Development Fund that gives $150,000 to launch ready products in games. And that is actually incubating products that are ready to go to market. It's essentially what's coming out of the University of Utah and these programs right now.
An interesting point you raised about incentive programs in Montreal and not necessarily sticking around. I'm wondering, Marshall, just go ahead and think about incentive programs. For the film industry, you're kind of coming for a single shoot, right? And so you're not necessarily expecting the company to move to Utah. They're doing a film in Utah. But when you're trying to get an established structure here, whether it's in games or in technology or others, I mean, what is some of the thinking that Go Ahead has on incentive programs for businesses, particularly tech and media businesses?
That's interesting. What we've been finding out, and it's very clear, incentives itself turns out to be icing on the cake for the officer who is interested in that particular company in the finance. What really brings companies to Utah, to any location, is the infrastructure and the other support that is already there. Maybe the penciling at the last of it, that's one of the reasons why the agency. We're finding that companies like the Boeings of the world and the rest, they come before first because of what they see here as the opportunity, the infrastructure, the other
presumably, you know, low taxes, low cost, are those part of the selling points that go into those things?
Yes.
And to that, we actually did not take any incentives to come in. It was the talent was in, and certainly, I think the thing to understand though is that keeping EA in probably requires incentives.
And that's a good point. That would be one of the issues. Yes, somewhere along the way, yes, we do have to come up with an incentive to make sure, and it's not always in just hours. The incentive may be in a training program to support expansion.
Sure. So we'll open it up to questions from the audience very soon here, because I think we've got such talent here as well. We want to get your input into this discussion. Let me come back to you, Clark, and come back to this talent question and being in Silicon Valley. Obviously, if you're like a computer developer, like Silicon Valley is presumably the place to be. If you're finance, New York's the place to be. If you want to be in movies, people would think traditionally LA is the place to be. And having spent 5 years in Illinois and helping to work with broadband and the advancement of broadband in Illinois, Chicago felt the same way. Hey, we're getting passed over. Well, how can we get people to stay here in our state, in our city? So could you just talk a little bit about what it is that brings people in tech or media to Utah? Is it because that they're here and they want to stay here, or are you beginning to see people finding enough, nexus of talent here that this is a place to come to, a destination?
We do have a lot of homegrown talent here. That's always been an advantage. Now that the programs like Craig's are achieving a lot more international renown, I think that helps draw in the youngest talent here. The things that incubate this talent in other places and are beginning to here are the indie scene, as we call it in games as they do in film, which has become much more robust and exciting. For us, yes, Silicon Valley is a locus of games development. So is Austin, Texas, and Boston, and New York to some extent. Georgia, even with its incentive programs. But really, it is about the talent. And John bringing EA's office here, to some extent, it's even a PR issue. I don't think that it's known, even in the games industry, for instance, that Disney Infinity, one of the most valuable and successful franchises in video games right now, with billions of dollars, is made right down the street. Or even that Animal Jam, which is rivaling Disney for kids' social media, social networking, is made right down the street. But there are some very important properties, IPs, that are actually being grown here.
Talk just a minute about kind of the kid-friendly or kid-focused properties. You mentioned Disney and your own company. Speak a little bit both from the game side and maybe from the film side, because my understanding is that there's a good focus of talent for animation.
Yeah, there certainly is, and I think something that you see as a tangent of the games industry in a lot of places is the film and digital effects industry. And there's a lot of cross-pollination there. And you see a lot of artists who would maybe cut their chops in games and ultimately want to get into film and digital effects, able to move back and forth because those industries are both vibrant in the same place. And they do, absolutely. Some of the best artists that we've ever hired on to work in film effects.
Virginia,
yeah, well, first of all, my daughter's obsessed with Animal Jam, so thanks for that. I think my allowance just goes from me to her to you, so. Economics at work right here. But the family genre, and again, because I have kids at the age that are not a TV generation, they are a YouTube generation. They watch YouTube, they watch Netflix. They don't, when I say you can't, no more TV, they're like, no, I'm watching TV. So, I have that answer. And I did just hear a statistic about YouTubers too in Utah. We have an exceedingly large proportion of YouTube channels based here. The content creators are based here in Salt Lake, which I think is fascinating. I don't know where that statistic, how I pulled exactly that statistic, but certainly the platforms have changed, the world has changed, and I don't think you can get away with ignoring that anymore. I also don't think quality necessarily ends up on a bigger platform. I think it's all, there's all levels, and you have to take that into consideration. So I think the family produced and quality media for kids on all platforms is definitely key.
Do you want to speak to the indie scene versus the established company, either in film or digital media? What's your perception of incentives to attract smaller film companies versus larger ones coming in and out of state?
Well, on the film commission side, our sweet spot is really that $3 to $10 million market, and a lot of that ends up being an indie market just because that is sort of the range where they're shooting, but it doesn't necessarily discount, again, these platforms like Netflix and Amazon, the content creators that are a little more mobile. They're not wedded to a studio system that's based in California or New York. Canadians definitely are nemesis right now, and their incentives for film are beating us out for some of these things. So, but I do think it speaks to, they're headed up to Canada and they're headed right back out. So I would love to see some fostering growth of smaller regional companies that can really stick around.
Good. Well, we've got about 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to pull on this microphone. I don't know how far it'll extend, but I invite those in our audience who'd like to speak to any of the questions to come on up, raise your hand, do this Phil Donahue style for those who remember Phil Donahue. Anyone have a question here? All right, let's see how far this cord will snag. And if you would please introduce yourself so we can have record.
I'm Bob Landin, I'm a producer director of Scandinavian Films and a sort of nuts animation studio out of Sweden and based in Heber, Utah as well. And we are very happy to work with John Dean on our present projects on the gaming side. But let me talk to the film side, because this was Hollywood on the slope, so what was your... And we're talking about digital media and gaming mostly, and not so much about film actually, and producing films in. And my feeling is, as a foreigner who came to Utah 20 years ago, fell in love with the mountains and the sunshine and the place in general, but working on all continents with my film projects, this is just a great location to have a film production company. I have never done a film in Utah or about Utah. I've done it in Idaho and Montana and around, never in Utah, I just live here. I like it. But I'm also teaching, together with Sterling Bamagan last year, the advanced filmmaking class at the U, and I was astonished that there was hardly any connection between the university and the film industry locally. And film students generally, and this is not your digital department, which is great because you're doing what the film departments here need to do to connect it to the business. And the Film Commission, when I started to understand what you guys were doing, there's such a focus of bringing Hollywood to Utah. Then they come here, they spend maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 days filming, and they disappear. And the good post-production companies we have here in the state, they don't survive here because there is no support for the post-production that needs to be here so that we can create a film industry. You spend 20, 30, 40 days in filmmaking, shooting, 6, 8, 10 months in post-production. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of money. And Los Angeles don't give about what we do here in Utah. So I would like us to address that issue, how we can support the companies who are here to maintain people of capacity. There's no one here representing a studio that is being built up on the hill. Do you know about the studio, or don't you believe in the studio? Sundance could be the basis for developing Hollywood in Utah.
Great. That sounds like a question for Virginia and Marshall. Would you care to address that?
Well, first I would say about the University of Utah is I think their program currently has been more theoretical and film studies based, but UVU, and I think they're working on that or looking to ways to change that. But UVU does a ton with the film industry, and you see people come out of that program and go right into the local film industry. There are a number of local production companies, but yes, on the scale that we're talking about, working with our incentive companies, our incentive programs, we do have a few locally that sort of are churning out movie after movie. But I would love to see that grow. I definitely think it's important to, similar to keeping the digital media people around, I want to keep the film people around too, and I would love to see more industry happen. And that's a goal for me, similar to, again, with the post houses, is connecting all of those pieces. I feel like it's gotten very fragmented. People aren't talking to each other. The equipment houses aren't talking to the post houses, so nobody knows what organizations coming in, what they're working on, and how we can keep them around. So that's definitely a goal for us in the coming year.
Thank you. John wants to reply to that. Go ahead.
Related to what Bo was saying, can I ask Tom to speak on this? It's a Tom I see there. Because if anyone's got an insight into doing digital media post-production and trying to do it for the States, Tom, can I ask you to speak on that a bit, Tom?
Would you like to hop in here?
Okay, so I worked in visual effects for a long time. I worked on Avatar. I was one of the supervisors in Avatar.
So that was pretty big, right?
Yeah, you might have heard of it. And one of the things for me, like when, I don't know, I'll just give you a little bit of my background and story so that this all kind of makes sense where I'm coming from. So when I was on Avatar, that's when I really went from being an artist to understanding a little bit more about business, right? So I had a department of 60 people. In that department, I had developers, I had pure artists that, because I was the head of the textures department, so we painted everything in the film. And so I went from everything from people who were inventing new software that's now available on the market as a paint package for 3D to people who were more comfortable with a paintbrush than a computer, yet they had to work on the computer. And so I had to figure out how to make it so that all those people could work together, and so that we could also do 500 times the work that we did on King Kong for the same amount of money. And as I was doing that, I had to turn my business brain on. And then, so we, in my department, figured out how to save about $5 to $10 million just within my department by optimizing processes and doing things like that. So after that, I started a software company, came to Utah eventually, largely because of the pool of talent and because of the low cost of living. So it's like you said, it's a great place to live. And the oddest thing that I started to notice here is there's a huge pool of talent, but there's no organization whatsoever. I mean, I have my background, I don't even know who works in visual effects here, except for the people that I randomly run into. I don't know if there's visual effects companies here. I know a couple of guys that eke by making a living. I can't imagine they make more than 50 grand a year owning their own company. And like those are the stories I've heard of. But the thing that I am noticing, and you guys can tell me if you notice the same thing. So number one, there's no cohesion anywhere. There's a lot of people doing some stuff. That's how I would explain my experience with the digital media industry here. There's guys like the guys on the stand that are doing real things, but the talent level and the money level available in Utah is totally incongruous with what's actually going on. You've got tons of wealth in the state, you've got tons of money in the state, but then you've got tons of talent. The talent doesn't know where to go except for out of the state. And there's diehards that are like, well, I just like Utah, so I'm gonna live off nothing and hope for the best. You know, there's a lot of those, and then yeah.
So, do you believe, to Bo's point, that we could actually keep all of the post-production here if we could get organized?
For sure.
And it's cost effective.
For sure. And I have one more thing to to add to it, sorry, I'm not trying to go over time or anything, but the thing that I'm noticing is that artists don't know what the path is from being an artist to a businessman. And that's kind of become my passion over the last year, of looking at all the things that I've done wrong over the last 3 years and saying, oh my gosh, I can lay out all the things that I spent tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to figure out, and I can be like, oh, you can do all this stuff for free, and you can really figure out how to do business as an artist. There's nothing like that I know of. Craig hinted about an MBA that's kind of combining stuff like that. We need that. Because if you had 100 people graduating, even just with the stuff that I'm preparing, saying, okay, you do these 15 things, you can do them in like 2 months for next to nothing, and you understand business.
Well, it sounds like what you're getting at, and love to keep this resource going, is some kind of incubation for artists, right? For digital media instead of just tech. What are some of the panelists think specifically on this point of networking the digital media industry? Does anyone have anything you'd like to add on that, Marshall?
Networking is one of the tenets I've always lived with. I've always thought that the only way to be successful at doing a business is finding out what everyone else is doing it and building on the experience of others. Through the things that we've been trying to do in GoIt, is having exactly what's happening here, these self-organizing activities where people come together and hear each other and then maybe say, hey, maybe together we can do that. Back 100 years ago when I started in engineering back on Long Island, one of the key things about the entrepreneurs and split-offs, if you will, from all the electronic companies that were on Long Island was exactly the same thing. We would meet each other somewhere, around a bar maybe, or whatever, and we would be able to talk about what was going to happen, and then the next thing you know, you have 2 or 3 guys going off together, one guy who understood finance, and the other guy who understood ICs, and they had a company. And that's what we are trying very, very hard to promote here through a number of things that GoIt has been doing. We're trying very, very hard. Self-organizing is the way to go.
Keep your thoughts, we'll come back to them. Let's go ahead and get into the question.
Yeah, Roger, can you talk to that too?
I certainly can. I guess I come with a question and a plea. The question is,
Do you mind saying who you are?
I'm Roger Altizer, University of Utah, American Arts and Engineering. We make video games and teach people to make video games. We have a huge problem at EAE, which is, as Clark pointed out, we have enormous talent that's ready to roll tomorrow. They work in teams, they work with advanced technologies, they're innovators, they understand the soft side and the hard side of the business, right? Our biggest problems are we can't incubate them through the state. And I have to give you 2 distinct examples of that. One of the things that makes EAE great is our students all commercialize their games at the end of that project. We fight every single year to make sure that the state doesn't own 2/3 of every one of those games because of IP policies at universities in the state of Utah. So anything created in the state of Utah, you know, they want to own 2/3 of it. So that's no good for launching a company. The second problem that we have is we've worked for the last couple of years with Microsoft. We've got an agreement where they're going to give us 20 Xbox One development kits, full access to the store, and mentorship to make it happen. They've already given us cash, we've given that cash to the students to make it happen. The state won't sign the paperwork because of the risk, right? They don't want to be on the hook for if a student releases something behind an NDA wall to the public. And fair enough, there is risk there.
I'll sign it.
I know, right? I love it, right? Maybe we should talk about that because we have to spin these opportunities out. So there are great opportunities for our students, but most of those opportunities have come from out of state. And the burden that we have is the complications caused by the state of Utah. So I guess my plea is to the community is that we do have to organize, and the banner that we have to organize really has to be community driven as opposed to state driven.
Yeah. Those are excellent concrete answers. Thank you. Well, maybe we'll have a rattle pretty soon. We have another question right here.
I'm Lorenzo Swank. I was teaching iPhone programming at the University of Utah. I started developing the curriculum in 2009 for a number of years. So having spent a lot of time on that curriculum and working with students, especially right after after the App Store launched, we saw a lot of really creative projects, a lot of innovative students who had energy and passion. And the most talented ones always kept coming back to me saying, it seems like there's a lot of Series A action in Utah, but there's not a lot of energy or effort, or more importantly, mentoring on the seed stage for our ideas in Utah. So what do? Well, if we want seed money, you've got to go to California. Yeah, it's going to cost an arm and a leg, but that's where you're going to get the mentoring. And so when we have things like Boom Startup, and we have the Utah Valley Entrepreneurial Forum with their barn-raising event, it seems like there's just a dearth of really deeply emotionally involved early-stage venture capital. I mean, we have venture capital that is in the seed stage here, but it doesn't seem like, from a student's perspective, and the feedback they're giving me all the time, there's a real lack of mentorship or a lack of hand-holding for people who say, I have the technical talent, I have an idea, how do I take it from idea to commercial product? So my question for you in the panel especially, when there are bits and pieces of, there's this thing up at the university, I didn't even know that it existed, and it's funny, we're going to teach up there this game and apps lab. It's disconnected from everything else, and we don't know about it. How do we, following back up with the same comment, how do we develop a sense of community where these things are tied together and have the right passion? Does it have to start from venture capital? Does it have to start from the instructors? Does it have to start from industry? Who needs to take the lead?
Great question. So let's tackle that in the previous one.
Can I just take a tangent to that before there's an answer to your question? And I think part of the answer that I've come to the conclusion of, because I've seen the same frustrations there over the last 6-8 years, right? There's all these groups trying to do something, and there's just nothing really in the center of it that pulls them all together. And I think if you're somebody who's looking to invest, it's very hard to actually have. Let's say I want to invest in something, and I really don't know a particular sector. How do I find out about it? I've got to do a lot of work to do that, and you expect the company I'm talking to be able to give you that information. And a lot of times, if you're a startup straight out of university, you don't have that knowledge yourself. You're actually looking for some of that guidance and mentorship as part of the package that you get. So there's a disconnect there. And I think part of it comes down to what I said in the opening, which is the problem is, you say we're in digital media, we say we're in games or something. This is too broad. Maybe if we could kind of think about what's the connective tissue to all these things that we're talking about, and maybe get that group of people together on a regular basis. So it's an open invite to everybody to say, can we get together once a month? Anyone who's interested in actually trying to figure out what is at the center, to be a place in the center we can figure out where everything, whether it's jobs, job creation, jobs that are available that people can go to, ideas on what we might want to put to the state, to marshal, not just for drones, but also for, other, maybe we've got ideas about what the state can do to help here, that we can have a conversation with the different cities around here, all of whom are very interested in this area. I think the problem is it's too broad.
Let me follow up with Virginia and Marshall on the university and the industry association. So, on film, what role can MPAU play? You mentioned Utah Valley and their role. We've heard a lot about the U and its digital media. Could you just speak a little bit about what role these institutions like universities, trade associations, as well as the state can play?
Well, one thing I have been obsessed with, as Ricky can attest to, and I think I've sent it and talked about it with a number of people, is Made in New York. I don't know how many of you have seen that concept, and I've been talking to Mitch, the gentleman who got this organization started in New York, out of Brooklyn, and it is really bringing together the film industry, the gaming industry, people like Spotify, or app developers, all under one organizational roof, not a physical on-the-ground organization, but a way to do exactly this. And I am determined to bring Mitch out here for a conversation, sort of creative summit about how do we make this thing happen. We have all the elements, and we're not talking, just like we've been saying ad nauseum here. So I would love to see that happen. I don't, it's not going to be just me. It has to be all of us, and I'm committed to making that happen, but for sure.
Marshall, anything to add?
All I can really say is that really is the right way to go. If we can find self-organizing groups around a particular area, and that is what drives, that's what gets the ear of my office and also the offices and the folks up at the legislature. They will understand when we come together. And so that's the only way we can do it. One voice, right? One voice.
Go ahead, Clark.
I do have to give credit to GoEd and the legislature for the U-Star support, the GAVC funding for our program EA to get going. And these two guys have been instrumental in coming up and giving up their time and saying, do this, do this. So if it wasn't without the industry already here, so all that, which gets back to the incubator we're having on campus with the method, it all links together. It's happening.
I misintroduced you. Thank you, Craig. Clark, go ahead.
If I can add to that, to your point specifically, there is money out there that wants to be found, right? There are a lot of people looking for the next Finland, and there's no reason why we can't be that in terms of game development. It really just takes a spark. Part of that spark is the students and the young people coming out and realizing that starting a company is even an option. And usually it's one or two high-profile games. It's, Utah has its Rovio that can be, the basis of, decades of prosperity in game development. But that money is out there, and to John's point, we start speaking with more of one voice there. We can be attracting investors specifically, talking to a lot of these people on both coasts who are VC investors who are starting to take an interest in Utah. A lot of them are already making investments here in the extractive industries, in biomedical, and they're starting to kind of pick up their ears and say, well, yeah, we want to come by and see what you guys are doing because we've heard some things about game development here. And, the point where we can kind of take them on a roadshow and say, all right, the next time you're out here meeting with your companies, give us an afternoon. We'll take you to, half a dozen game developers that are at Series A, at seed, at growth, and see what's going on here. I think we can attract a lot of interest.
Thanks. Next question here.
It's not really a question. I'm here, as John knows, Craig knows, Marshall knows, we have been discussing this for a better part of 5 to 6 years. And everything you guys have said was said 6 years ago. Marshall and the Film Commission have been working on this unmanned aerial systems initiative for about 6 months now. And we hit a wall to a point that we knew as a offices, we really couldn't do anymore unless the community got involved. So we kind of summarized and said, we're going to have a meeting, and that meeting, we're going to form an association. We're going to push these guys to form an association, and that's what we did. So I'm going to be bold here right now. If you guys want this to happen, do not leave this room without forming the association today. You guys need to do this today. Or this is going to be forgotten 6 months from now. You guys are going to be here saying the exact same thing again.
Okay, so
yeah, what is the name? What is the name of the association here?
So if anybody wants to, then I'll take that challenge. Contact me afterwards.
This is great. This is great. So, do you have a suggested name?
Not digital media.
All right, there we go. We probably have time.
That was the only thing we came to the room with.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions here, and then final statements right here.
Comment, maybe a question. Bryce Stewart, I was at the church, LA's church over Phone Bridge for about 5 years, and now I have a new studio in Salt Lake, downtown. I spent a lot of time in Austin this last year, shot at the City Limits Theater down there, and got involved with the Chamber of Commerce and what they're doing with their Austin A-list, and it seems like that is kind of a market that we could match ourselves to, and they're doing some things, they're thinking outside of the box in ways that I think we can learn from, in bringing their tech, their incubation, all to the fray. And I think that there are other markets that we can learn from too, as we're kind of developing our own growth there and going through the growing pains and whatnot. I'm anxious to understand a little bit more about the metrics that are behind incentives here and how it plays in all of your worlds. Obviously, with film, I know that some of the things that people are doing are trying to wrangle, if they're a film company, they're trying to wrangle education and other dollars that may come to play for them on the state level here. What is going to change that? Who is going to change that dynamic? Those people who have developed bigger incentive funds, how do they get there? And then ultimately, I'm anxious to understand what that means. You know, what does incentive dollars mean for you as it does for Virginia? So I would ask you first. I'm trying to understand a little bit more about your world, because I know that you live in that world, and you probably don't get maybe 7 words out when people are talking to you without one of them being incentive. So.
Yeah, it is definitely something that we have to look at. I mean, if we're going to compete on a bigger scale, we need a bigger pool of money to even start the conversation. Again, I don't think incentives are the #1 thing that bring people here, as we've heard in every industry. But I think what it takes is a supportive legislator. It also takes the legislation understanding what what we're doing on the ground, how much impact we have, which is a very hard figure. You know, I want to hear, they want to hear from me, what's the ROI? What dollar for dollar are you getting back from that incentive, so that if you can show that it's actually making real money, and this is not, this is not the $60 million figure that I give on a public level, because it doesn't really include, that's just money spent in Utah. It doesn't include the marketing dollars like Marshall's talking about. It doesn't include, the restaurant that can stay in business in southern Utah, because the film production did spend a majority of their time there for a month. I kept them going for the whole year. That is a very hard figure to pin down, and I have to work on that this year. And we have allocated money. Ricky and I are talking about doing an in-depth study. New Mexico just did one of their incentive program that has really helped them garner support. So I have those 2 lines to straddle. I have to tell the artistic story and film and passion and diversity of our geography, and it's so gorgeous and it's a billboard for the state. And then I have to tell the story of hard, cold facts of what those dollars do here. And I think those are the 2 worlds that I've got to figure out how to combine.
Thank you. I think our last question here, and then we'll have closing thoughts.
I'm Dan Thomas from Utah Foundation. I'm changing the subject, I'm sorry, but this is a role for Marshall. Is there a role for Utah's congressional delegation in kind of clearing away the regulatory obstacles from the FAA for your drones? Congress can't make rules for aviation, but they can set deadlines, they can demand accountability, they can essentially light a fire in the FAA, maybe clear away some legal deadwood that is keeping this from happening, and then instead of exemptions for everything, you'd be operating under a consistent set of rules.
I'm glad you asked that question. Next week I'm going to be in DC and we're going to talk about that. One of the things that we all have to recognize with congressional delegation and any legislator, they respond to action from their constituents. We have to tell them what we want and why we want it. And so that's part of the issue we have. They can ask the FAA to do all kinds of things, except what they really need is practical information from us about the kinds of rules that we would like to see. And those are some of the things that we're working on. For instance, when it comes to, and right now the FAA is getting ready to come out with a notice of rulemaking for operation of small unmanned aerial systems. The rumors of some of the regulations, if you have parameters that they are talking about, do not really support the commercial operations that we already know about. So we have to wait for a rule to come out, then we have to organize and then respond to it and tell our congressionals that this is what we'd like to see in those rules. So they have a role to play, but we got to tell them what the play is.
Thanks, Marshall. So we've had a really I think, wide-ranging and I believe productive conversation here. Some of the themes we heard about, of course, include the role of education and the role of entrepreneurship, maybe some attention to post-production as a way to enhance and develop this industry. We've obviously heard about unmanned technology and how that can play a role, but we've also kind of heard a call or a plea for an association of some sort. I just wanted to put those out before getting everyone's final thoughts. One more point to mention that we haven't discussed much is the role of the Sundance Film Festival, of course, which is next week, a huge showcase for the state. Obviously, a lot of individuals outside of the state, but Utah is part of the mix too. So let me just put all that on the table, and we'll start at the end and ask Clark if you've got any 30 seconds to a minute closing statement, and we'll conclude with Virginia before we say goodbye.
One of my takeaways from this is that it sounds like there's a real opportunity for the universities here to have an EAE type program in film that is more practical film development and post-production stuff. And I would just append to that, there is a gold rush in kids animation right now. There is so much opportunity in that. There are so many new players out there looking for it and buying it. We have enormously talented animators coming out of BYU and the U. That's where we've hired a lot of our talent. They don't want to go work at Pixar because they don't know that the opportunity is here.
I would say what we have in common is the experience of the player, or whether it's an audience or a player, there's an experience that goes on. And just what's come out of CES from last week is the experience going to change with the human-computer interface. I saw one which was an arm band you put here that registers your muscles in whichever way you put it. Your arm and the fist and the fingers, it reads the electronic, and that's going to change everything as well. So we're talking about what's going on now. I can't even imagine what's happening. Luckily, our students are going to beg us for that, I know, next week to change that interface. So we're having to reinvent ourselves now, as I know everybody else is.
So, we're not sexy. I'm not talking about myself here, obviously. That's obvious. We're not sexy, right? Sundance Film Festival is sexy. People come here, and a lot of people I know say they didn't even realize that Sundance was a Utah thing. In Park City, the Republic of Park City is where it's held. And I think part of that one voice comes down to really figuring out what is it that makes it sexy, right? So what are the students who want to go work at Pixar or Google, right? So they're cool places. They're aspirational for the millennial, those young kids that have these high aspirations. It's good for them, right? So what really gets people excited is innovation, right? The thing on your arm, the nano robots that will soon be inside our bloodstreams, want to trigger our activities and talk to our cell phones. Those are innovations that get people excited. Everything you're hearing from CES is about innovations, right? So what is it that we do, right? Clark mentioned Disney Infinity. It's a fantastic product, right? Who talks about it other than Disney? Disney certainly don't promote the state of Utah. We could be promoting it, right? And talking about that's homemade. So I like the idea of made in Utah. I think that's a really good takeaway. And I'm serious about whatever we call it. Let's get together. So whether it's I don't know if we combine it with the Breakfast Come Supper Club. But we did talk about getting together a meeting once a month where the students from the grassroots, right? Let's get people who are interested in connective tissue to come together once a month. And let's have someone present something of interest. Let's get debates like this going once a month, conversations, but people who are interested so we can figure out what do we want, because until we know what we want, Marshall can't help us. Other than drones.
Thanks a lot for that. Speaking of drones and unmanned systems and Sundance, the Film Commission and UVU and some of us will be putting on some seminars about responsible use of unmanned systems in the film industry. And that will be one way we'll be able to highlight, if you will, our operations and our capabilities in using digital media, digital systems, and marrying it with unmanned systems in a very responsible way. Something that will set us aside. And so that's how we plan to use this opportunity at Sundance.
I'm going to actually take issue with what John said, because I actually think we are sexy. We do have Disney Infinity, we do have Sundance Film Festival, we do have Smart Bomb, we have all the elements. You walk downtown, the restaurants that we have, the bars that we have, phenomenally changed in the last 10 years. I grew up here, I left for a long time, I ran screaming after high school because I was like, I gotta get out of here. And now I come back and I look at it and it's an entirely different city than it was. But we are still the aw shucks state, like, oh, we're just Utah, like, oh, it's super cheap to be here, like, that's not what we want to be saying. We want to say, you want to be here because the talent here rivals the talent anywhere, and it's easier and better to work here than anywhere else. So I think, I'm in, I want to meet, I want to get this thing going, but I do think it's a perception issue. We have to stop talking about ourselves as, gosh, we have it so great here. Like, that's not it.
It's all about the story. If you can tell the story, we can tell it on film. But you need to tell the Utah story.
What a great closing words there, Virginia, about don't sell the cheap, sell the lavish talent that we have, the sexiness. Want to thank every one of you for being here. Part of the goal of the Utah Breakfast Club is to focus on enhancing the advantages of Utah and confronting the challenges. And I think we've probably experienced both in this discussion. I think there's some real advantages in this film, digital media technology space, and there are some challenges that we've heard about. But equally important is finding the solutions, and we've certainly heard some here today. If you like what you've heard here today, I encourage you to tell someone else or tell 2 or 3 other people about the Utah Breakfast Club. Get them to register on our website. Click the sign up on utahbreakfast.com. And our next 2 events are Saturday, January 31st, Silicon Slopes. Does it live up to the marketing hype? That will be on Saturday, part of Start SLC. And next month, February 12th, same place, same location, finding solutions to the inversion here in Utah. Before we close, I want to thank our sponsors, the Utah Foundation, Beehive Startups, and most importantly, thank each member of our panel for being here, Virginia, Marshall, John, Craig, and Clark, and thank you. So please join me in giving a round of applause